No, the title of this video was not clickbait. The man we are going to talk about today was a Jewish, Lutheran, Presbyterian, Anglican, German Nazi, British MP, coup conspirator, white nationalist terrorist, Czech spy, Buddhist monk, Japanese propagandist, and Dalai Lama. Buckle up, everyone, because this is the insane story of Trebitsch Lincoln. Ignatius Timothy Trebitsch Lincoln was born into an Orthodox Jewish family in Hungary. Now, this is usually where I'd make a joke about Hungary being a crappy country, but I know there is one guy who watches my videos in auto-translated Hungarian, and I don't want him coming after me. Anyway, Lincoln studied as an actor, which will come into play later when we get to his life as a con artist. Growing up, Lincoln was quite the kleptomaniac. In particular, he had a habit of stealing gold watches. After getting into trouble with the Hungarian police over his habit of repeated theft, Lincoln fled to London. And you know someone is really desperate when they're fleeing toward London. In London, he met a group of Christian missionaries and converted from Judaism to Lutheran Christianity, the first of his many conversions. With Lutheranism, he found a deep, spiritual religion that would stick with him for the rest of his psyche. He immediately converted to Presbyterianism. He then traveled to Canada, where he attempted to convert the Jewish population of Montreal to Christianity, although he failed to convert even a single Jew. Honestly, I'm just imagining what that must have been like. Hey you, random Jew on the street. Do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior Jesus? Listen, dude, for the last time, I'm not interested. Come on, just hear me out. I even wrote a song about it. Well, I wrote this song for the Christian youth. I want to teach Jews the Christian truth. Because if you want to... Listen, I'm out of here. When the whole Presbyterian missionary thing didn't really work out for Lincoln, he befriended the Archbishop of Canterbury and converted yet again and became an Anglican priest despite knowing close to nothing about Anglican doctrine. He also got married around this time to a woman named Margaret, who looks like she was taken right from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Estrogen. Soon after, he met Stephen Rowntree, a member of the Liberal Party in the UK. With Rowntree's support, he got elected to the British Parliament, despite not even being a British citizen at the time. Many political cartoons at the time, such as this one, mocked this. This one over here mocks his Hungarian accent, saying, "We will not send the budget to the House of Lords to be thrown out only again." Yet, Lincoln failed to win re-elections in 1910. At the beginning of World War I, Lincoln got a job censoring military letters, but he got fired after he would get bored and doodle on the letters. He'd often critique the contents of the letters and send the letter with his commentary. Like, imagine if you wrote your girlfriend a love poem and received it with Lincoln's notes. Later on, after a large amount of failed financial ventures, a desperate Lincoln approached the British government and begged them to let him be a spy. He claimed he would go to Germany and become a British double agent. He was, of course, rejected and laughed out of the office. But Lincoln, being a true opportunist through and through, immediately went to the German government and offered to become a regular spy for the Germans, and they accepted. Lincoln began spying for the Germans, but the Germans soon realized just how incompetent he was and fired him. At this point, Lincoln traveled over to the U.S. with his family. On the boat, he started an affair with a married woman named Annie Junt. At the same time, he started another affair with Annie's married sister, Olive, as well as multiple other women on the ship, going by a different false identity with each one. By the way, at any point in this video, you can safely assume he is having an affair with at least 2 women simultaneously. Eventually, after settling in America, he went to get a haircut in a barbershop that happened to be owned by Annie Junt's husband. Charles Junt had heard from his wife that there was an incredibly kind and helpful man on the boat named Trebitsch Lincoln. Charles invited Lincoln over for dinner, and they became good friends. Later, Lincoln began renting a house in New York, and immediately started an affair with the landlord's daughter, because Lincoln will be Lincoln. Now, an ordinary person in Lincoln's situation would probably settle down and take things easy for the rest of their life. But Lincoln needed the fame and the recognition. It was like a drug to him, like stealing was, or cheating on his wife. Yeah, let's just say Lincoln was not known for his healthy habits. So he straight up published his entire story in the New York Times, bragging about how he had gone from British MP to anti-British spy. When the British found out, they were furious. They hired the Pinkerton Detective Agency to track him down. Yes, those Pinkertons. When they found him, he got put on trial and extradited to England, where he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. While in prison, he was financially supported by his ex-mistress, Annie Junt, who transferred massive sums of money to him without her husband's consent. You gotta feel a bit bad for that guy. Lincoln frequently wrote letters to his wife, saying that prison wasn't that bad. Did you forget he was married? Well, so did he apparently, because he arranged for many female acquaintances of his to come and visit him in prison. But, through all of that, his wife Margaret was steadfastly loyal to Lincoln. With Lincoln in prison, she fell into poverty, yet consistently defended her imprisoned husband, while he never could have cared less about her. After 3 years in British prison, Lincoln was released, but banned from ever coming to England again. He moved to Weimar, Germany. Over there, he became unlikely friends with far-right World War I general Max Bauer, It was an unlikely pairing considering Bauer's deep hatred of Jews and Lincoln's deep being a Jew, yet the two grew very close. So close that Bauer told Lincoln a secret. He was planning a coup to oust what he considered to be the illegitimate Weimar government, and he invited Lincoln to play an important role in the upcoming coup. The plan was simple. Far-right paramilitary brigades loyal to the conspirators would march on Berlin and take it by any means necessary. But the night before the planned coup, disaster struck. Guys, I got some bad news. Weimar intelligence found out about our plan. They're going to be expecting us. Coup is canceled. You guys can go home. Hey, wait a minute. Many of you in this room might not know me, but I'm Trebitsch Lincoln, and I won't let you guys cancel this. After all of our months of planning, you just want to pack it up and throw it all away? We are on the verge of victory. We just need to seize it. This is our chance to go down in the history books. Well, actually, you guys have already gone down in the history books as the losers of World War I, but this is my chance to go down in the history books. Let's give it our all, and tomorrow we dine in the Reichstag, inshallah. After Lincoln's impassioned speech, the other coup members agreed to go through with it and launched their full-scale assault on Berlin. At first, it seemed like the coup was a resounding success. When the troops marched on Berlin, the Weimar government panicked and fled to Dresden. Berlin was completely empty for the taking. After Berlin had fallen, World War I General Ludendorff declared himself Chancellor, and Lincoln was rewarded for his help by being declared Minister of Propaganda and Press Censor. Once again, he was made a press censor, but this time, no one would be telling him what he could and couldn't do. He immediately made use of his new powers by essentially censoring every single piece of outgoing information so that no one would know what was really happening in Berlin. But the coup had one big problem. Nobody in Germany saw them as legitimate, so none of the people in Berlin listened to anything they said. They did a general strike, and the whole thing kind of collapsed. But on the last day of the putsch, Lincoln met with a young man and video demonetizer who had flown in to come help the conspirators. That man's name was Adolf Hitler. Lincoln and Hitler had a long conversation and became friends. This is going to come into play later. When the Ludendorff government collapsed, Lincoln had the good sense to flee Berlin, but he actually wound up going right back there to meet one of his mistresses. He was discovered by the Weimar police and arrested for his participation in the coup, but he escaped prison and fled back to his homeland of Hungary. In Hungary, he joined a far-right proto-fascist terrorist group called White International. It was quite a diverse crowd. You had Germans, Hungarians, Russians, and many others. They really didn't care what your race was as long as you were racist. Trebitsch helped them plan for their planned coup, but he eventually intercepted a letter from a senior member of White International saying that he had discovered that Lincoln was a Jew and recommended eliminating him. Turned out these fascists weren't as tolerant as Lincoln thought. Lincoln couldn't believe it. The far-right proto-fascists had turned out to be anti-Semitic. So that night, he stuck into the main room of White International and stole every single incriminating document he could find. He tried to escape the country, but they were hot on his tail. Priority number one of White International now became hunting down and killing Lincoln before he could leak those documents. Lincoln realized that desperate times called for desperate measures, and using a ridiculously complex and convoluted plan, he faked his own death and escaped the country with the documents. Lincoln first tried and failed to sell the documents to the French and then to the British. Then, while falsely pretending to be the ex-head of White International, he managed to sell the documents to the Czech government. But once the Czechs found out he had sold the documents under false premises, they arrested him and put him on trial for treason and fraud. If convicted, the charges could potentially carry the death penalty. But Lincoln escaped yet again. But he had to get away quickly, and by this point he was wanted in every single European country. So he went to the only place he could think of, China. And this is where the story finally starts to get a little bit interesting. Now, at this time, China was embroiled in what we now know as the warlord period. Basically, there were like a bajillion warlords, all controlling small swaths of territory, and they were all fighting each other. It was chaos, and it was exactly the sort of environment that Lincoln could thrive in. Lincoln arrived in China, despite seemingly not knowing a single word of Chinese. He became the advisor of the warlord Yang Sen, and helped mastermind Yang Sen's capture of the city of Chongqing. And yes, I am pronouncing every Chinese word in this video correctly. It's actually the Chinese who are the ones mispronouncing them. Now, before we go any further, I want to give some background on Yang Sen. This dude didn't just look like Chinese Gus Fring. He acted like him also. He was brutal, even for a Chinese warlord. When he wanted to advance women's emancipation by teaching the local women how to swim, his wife refused to comply with the new program. Yang then proceeded to dress her in peasant clothing and force her at gunpoint to splash around in the river in front of tens of thousands of people. A true feminist and women's rights pioneer through and through. Perhaps because of Yang Sen's extreme brutality, Lincoln ditched him and found employment with no less than 3 other Chinese warlords, including Qi Hsei Yuan, Wu Hangqiang, and Wu Peifu. And yes, I pronounced all of those correctly, don't look that up. It was around this time where Lincoln underwent a sort of spiritual revolution. He became obsessed with this absolutely insane religion called Theosophism. And yes, that is their logo with the swastika censored for YouTube. It was a strange mix of Buddhist beliefs, Egyptian hieroglyph magic, and Jewish Kabbalah. He decided to go study Buddhist thought at a monastery in Sri Lanka. Maybe he thought that by converting to a mix of every single religion, he would be able to stop switching religions every 2 minutes. Or maybe he just wanted to collect every religion like they were the Infinity Stones. He took a ship to Sri Lanka that stopped at the Indonesian island of Java. There, he abandoned his family, and by the way, I bet you forgot about his family. He then left the island without them. His family would all eventually find their way off the island, except for his son John. Later on, when the Japanese invaded the East Indies during World War II, they brutally tortured John, who later committed suicide. Lincoln arrived in Sri Lanka and joined a Buddhist monastery. After some time at the monastery, he left Theosophism and fully embraced Buddhism. Around this time, his oldest son Ignatius was sentenced to death in England for a murder he had committed. Upon hearing about this, Lincoln attempted to go to England and witness the execution, but the British authorities correctly saw this as an attempt by Lincoln to become British again, and they didn't let him back. What motivates a man to become British? Even I don't know. Going back to his original plan of becoming a Buddhist monk, Lincoln traveled to a Chinese monastery where he was officially ordained as a monk. His final ordeal was the brutal burning ritual. If you want more details about that part, you can feel free to research it yourself, but I think you get all necessary info from the name. After the burning, he was officially ordained as the Bodhisattva Chao Kung. Yet Lincoln, or Chao Kung as he was now known, wasn't satisfied simply being a monk. He had to be the one running things. At this time, Lincoln was having strange visions and seemed to have believed that he was some sort of prophet/messiah figure. He decided to start his own fringe monastery in China. This new monastery attracted over 150 new acolytes, including 13 Europeans who had heard tales of the legendary mystic Chao Kung and had made the difficult journey to China to meet him. Life under Lincoln was brutal. He behaved like an authoritarian ruler in his monastery. When acolytes arrived, he told them that they should have no worldly possessions. Instead, they should give all their worldly possessions to Lincoln. He behaved like Terence Fletcher from Whiplash and abused many of the women who came to the monastery. One of the Buddhist nuns committed suicide after Lincoln had locked her in a tiny room for extended periods of time. Such acts of trolling were commonplace in the monastery. Lincoln was also now completely delusional and would frequently rant about his millions of followers, while in reality his followers had dwindled to only 12 in number. Sort of reminds me of my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe, by the way. With his followers leaving him due to his sadistic cruelty, Lincoln desperately needed a new source of income, and with the rise of Nazi Germany, he had an idea. Lincoln wrote Hitler a letter which sounded a little bit like this. Do you, or someone you love, suffer from being a genocidal empire losing a total war? Are you having trouble fighting colonial powers who hold resource-heavy lands on the other side of the globe? Don't you wish the native populations of those lands would rise up against your enemies? Well then, you need to try Lincoln. Lincoln is the supreme leader of all the Buddhists in the world. If you're willing to pay, Lincoln will get the Buddhists in Asia to ditch that whole pacifism part of their religion and just become Nazis instead. Lincoln will then lead a massive revolt of all the Buddhist Nazis across all of Asia. All he needs is your financial support. Give Lincoln money and he'll make your problems go away. Lincoln, you will not see your problems again. Side effects of using Lincoln may include annoyance, disappearance of your funds, and violation of your wife. Lincoln is not FDA approved. A lot of us might see Lincoln's letter and laugh at his false claims to be the supreme leader of all Buddhists, but the Nazis were actually extremely interested. They decided they were going to fund Lincoln's Buddhist rebellion, partially because World War II Germany was about as desperate as Cold War America. But, unluckily for Lincoln, he chose a very bad time to try his plan, because only a few days later, the deputy leader of the Nazi Party, Rudolf Hess, flew to Scotland in an attempt to make peace with the Allies, only to be promptly captured by the British. It was discovered that Hess had taken the trip because of astrological advice he had received. A certified Gemini moment, indeed. When that came to light, the Germans did a total 180 on all their occult projects, and these included Lincoln's Buddhist plan. The nail in the coffin was when Reinhard Heydrich discovered that Lincoln was Jewish. It must have been pretty sad for Hitler. There was a lot of things Hitler loved about Lincoln. A lot of things. But while the Germans rejected him, he saw an opportunity with the Japanese, who by this point had occupied his hometown of Shanghai. To attract the attention of the Japanese, he began making pro-Japan propaganda. He published a paper claiming that Japan behaved with extreme kindness towards all the people they occupied, which may very well be the single most incorrect sentence ever said by anyone in history. The Japanese noticed him and appointed him to be the leader of anti-British propaganda. In this, I think, Lincoln achieved our shared dream by being able to turn dunking on the British into a profitable career. But the Japanese saw Lincoln, with his deep Buddhist knowledge, as a very powerful asset. When news came that the Buddhist spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, had passed away, the Japanese saw a golden opportunity. You see, the Dalai Lama is not an elected position. When one Lama dies, the Buddhists believe he is reincarnated. They search until they find a child who they believe to be the new Dalai Lama. And that system is about as foolproof as it sounds, and has led to some funny anecdotes, like the sixth Dalai Lama frequenting the local brothels in the town when he wasn't Dalai Lama-ing. Perhaps with that particular Lama in mind, the Japanese declared Lincoln to be the next Dalai Lama, and sent him to establish a Buddhist puppet state that would be loyal to the Japanese. The Japanese invested significant resources into making Lincoln seem like the legitimate Dalai Lama, but he wasn't accepted by most Buddhists, and the whole project fell apart. By now, I hope we can all see that Lincoln was a pretty objectively bad person. He had essentially ruined his family, condemned his devoted wife to a life of poverty, brought a brutal death upon his son, started a sadistic cult that resulted in multiple deaths, and behaved as a serial cheater, an abuser, and a general tomfool. But interestingly, his final act was actually one of selflessness. Let me explain. So, until now I haven't touched on the absolute insanity that is Lincoln's family life, but I'll briefly go over it now. One of Lincoln's brothers went absolutely insane, one of his brothers became an extremist communist revolutionary, one of his brothers got arrested for sodomy with a Hungarian soldier, and then there was his brother Sandor, whom he loved very dearly. In the year of 1943, during the height of World War II, Lincoln somehow got news that Sandor had been murdered in the Holocaust. Lincoln couldn't believe it. To think that after all he had done for the Germans, they would still hate Jews? Lincoln figured that since he and Hitler went way back, he might be able to convince the Führer that this wasn't who he was. So Lincoln had the galaxy brain idea of nicely asking the Nazis to stop the whole Holocaust thing. He wrote a letter to Hitler explaining why he thought that killing the Jews was a bad idea and that he should stop. He signed it as, "Your old friend, Trebitsch Lincoln." Maybe Lincoln had realized what evil he had done and wanted to redeem himself with one final good act. Or maybe Lincoln was just legitimately stupid enough to think that this was about to work. Either way, when Hitler read the message, it's safe to say he wasn't thrilled. He ordered Lincoln killed, and the Germans told the Japanese to carry out the order. Sure enough, soon after, Lincoln died of stomach trouble, almost certainly killed on the order of the Germans. And so died Ignatius Trebitsch Lincoln, a man of uncountable identities. His accomplishments seem to have originated more from his good luck than from any inherent skill of his. I won't pass moral judgment on his character, but I must say, it makes for quite the entertaining story. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's my longest one by far, and even still, there's plenty of stuff about Lincoln's life that I had to cut out, like his insane attempts to revive the German monarchy. Because of the video's content, YouTube isn't really going to be recommending it to anyone, so like I said before, please don't forget to absolutely defenestrate that like button. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the video. It took way longer to make than it had any right to. It didn't help that I got laryngitis in the middle of it, and I couldn't record anything for a week. I have some absolutely massive videos planned, which are even crazier than this one, so subscribe if you're interested in that sort of stuff. Anyway, thanks for stopping by, long live Nguema, and I'll see you next time.